Is upon us. More than 260,000 South Africans have tested positive for COVID-19. South Africa is now among the top 10 countries in the world with the most COVID-19 cases. Nearly 4,000 people have died. A new record of 13,500 cases were reported in just one day this weekend. Hospitals are under huge pressure. Health workers are being infected, and there are reports that doctors are having to already pick who is likely to survive and who therefore should be given a bed, a ventilator, a chance. The economic situation is also dire, with food insecurity, poverty and unemployment rising. Now, this is the context for another speech from the President tonight. His last major address was on the 17th of June, nearly a month ago, and a lot has changed since then. Joining me now is Economist Senior Lecturer at Wits, Lumkile Mondi. Lumkile, thank you for joining us as usual. The big calls are for stricter lockdown regulations, certainly in some areas, maybe Gauteng, maybe where the hotspots are. Can South Africa afford that?
Well, it's too late. I think we've seen that the earlier regulations did not have a huge impact at all. I think South Africans have lost a lot of confidence around this regulation. They're basically taking their lives on their own hands and are doing as much as they want to do. So any enforcement will need to be complied by the citizen. I don't know how they're going to enforce any regulation, given that many of us don't have confidence in the regulation as well as the ability and the capability of enforcing them.
Yeah.
So I think...
Why did those earlier regulations fail so miserably, in your opinion?
They failed because of a lack of delivery of key infrastructure, of marginalization of many black communities, where there was no plan for those that don't have income, who are reliant very much on food parcels that never got there. Fortunately, many South African citizens, NGOs, and other donors played a bigger role to try and carry many lives because government was not there to support those families. So in that scenario, I think South Africa is really struggling with dealing with the pandemic. And of course, we've been exposed that we put regulation that we cannot enforce. But more importantly also, we have got lots of plans that are very difficult to implement because the state is simply not capable, and with the failure of delivering infrastructure, whether it's health infrastructure, it's running water, it's housing, all those are very clear to us that really, if we survive this this pandemic, we need to ensure that the economic recovery plan is stronger and addresses the key challenges, and there is a universal basic income grant on the table, which the Business for South Africa and what you've seen from Treasury Reserve Bank doesn't talk to those. So really, if families are left to starve, they will take the law into their own hands because people want to survive, they need food, and the state is not supporting them with that income.
Okay, so you've mentioned food parcels. We know there were delays with some of the UIF payouts. Also trying to find those beneficiaries for that new grant, that 350 Rand grant, proving difficulty, the procedures around that. So what you're saying is those safety nets didn't catch poor South Africans, and they are just too desperate. It can't happen again.
South Africans are too desperate. They've also been shortchanged by government, the president specifically, announcing a 500 billion Rand stimulus package, which has never happened whatsoever. So until we take this pandemic seriously, until government, the Reserve Bank and Treasury put money on the table and mobilize all resources in South Africa to deal with the pandemic, whilst at the same time ensuring that our economy continues, because without the economy, without huge stimulus package covering the health, supporting businesses, supporting households and the poor, I think these interventions aren't going to achieve the goals that we want. We want them to reduce the impact of the pandemic, at the same time to sustain lives.
So Lumkile, there have been huge efforts, government backing loans, working with the banks to try and ensure that small businesses can survive. That was part of the 500 billion. Why do you say that stimulus package doesn't exist?
Many of the businesses are informal in South Africa, and some of the businesses aren't even registered. So by really putting so many restrictions, and by the financial services sector, who in fact are very restrictive in terms of financing many businesses in the township, because they simply don't understand those businesses. So without them having access to that support, it meant that they were basically left to fend on themselves. And in the process, many people who are reliant on incomes in that sector did not have access at all. You look at the universal that income grant, also put demands on it. It never got to many people. So until we take the fiscal stimulus seriously, and the president announced more, and a serious stimulus that goes down to business, goes down to households, and is able to address the pandemic, but also make sure that we don't have South Africans destitute. I think this may be talk again, which we have seen previously by the president.
Are there not clever moves that the government could make? I mean, the one consistent call across various quarters has been for the reintroduction of a ban on alcohol sales, for instance. Some are even saying, you know, the economic cost is huge of those beds being taken up when they should be dealing with COVID-19 cases. Isn't that an example where maybe you should shut down a part of the economy?
That is well and good, but what you've understood is that South Africans have found ways of smuggling tobacco, smuggling alcohol, and making alcohol. And I think the black market is flooded, and we must not create a situation whereby we strengthen informality, because after the crisis, we may find ourselves in a very difficult position to mobilize revenue that is needed to finance public services. So we need to encourage formality, and how you encourage formality, you introduce rules that you can enforce. I think the alcohol, the tobacco, all of them, we've seen that the state is unable to enforce them, except by threats. But, you know, we need regulation that can be applied and be complied, and the state is able to nail those that are not compliant.
Yeah.
Both those restrictions haven't worked. So I'm very pessimistic about regulation.
Okay, and even enforcement of regulation has a cost. What could the president say tonight to make you happy looking at this from an economic perspective?
We want a restatement of the stimulus, not the talk, but a real flow of about 10% of our GDP as support, bring in the Reserve Bank and the Treasury, listening to those economists that wrote and advised Parliament that the supplementary budget was not sufficient because it's pushing us towards austerity. What we need money going into businesses, particularly small businesses, money going to informal businesses, going to households, and those South Africans that have no employment at all, through universal basic income grant. Without those, I think the health crisis, the economic crisis is not only going to take away lives, but it's also going to lead to famine. So I'm hoping the president will talk more about how money is going to go to businesses, how households are going to sustain their lives, and how we can ensure that those that don't have jobs do at least have some form of income to sustain themselves.
All right, thank you very much, economist and senior academic Lumkile Mondi. Do stay with us. We will be bringing you the president's address live, expected at around 8 o'clock tonight.